Oil-producing countries all across the world earn billions of dollars. However, particularly in the global south, in the developing world, many of these countries that have earned billions of dollars still have their people living in poverty. Guyana has just found oil. As a matter of fact, ExxonMobil has just found oil in Guyana. And in 2020, they will begin to earn oil income. The question is, will the people of Guyana benefit? Can we ask the question as to how has been the impact, or what has been the impact of oil revenues, enormous oil revenues, on the lives of citizens in the developing countries? The answer is very little in terms of increased employment and a better life. So today on Carib Nation, we would be looking at a country where oil was just discovered, and in 2020, that country will begin to have an income. Guyana, a country in South America. The company is ExxonMobil. Today in our studio, Carib Nation has an eminent guest, Mr. Floyd Haynes, who is the president of Haynes Incorporated, a businessman of 25 years here in the U.S. He's the chair of the board of the Roraima Institute, a Guyanese think tank based in Washington and Guyana. And he's a professor at the University of the District of Columbia, and he studied in Oxford and Harvard. Floyd, welcome to Carib Nation.
Welcome, Paul. It's good to be
My
here.
very first question to you, Floyd.
Yes,
ExxonMobil found oil in Guyana in 2015, publicly said they found oil, and by 2020, compared with the GDP of Guyana, Guyana will earn enormous income. Do you believe it was a good deal, a bad deal? Was it a good deal for Exxon, a good deal for the people of Guyana, or was it a win-win?
Well, it could be both. It could be a good deal for Exxon and a good deal for the government of Guyana. But what has to happen is that there needs to be proper management over those revenues as they come in. Now, at the top of the hour, you mentioned countries all over the world, particularly in the developing world, have been blessed with an abundance of natural resource, but still those countries have not been able to turn those resources into any kind of sustainable development. Now, the reason cited for this is a phenomenon known as the natural resource curse. The natural resource curse essentially says that countries with an abundance of natural sources tend to grow at a slower pace than their less resource-based counterparts, or countries with no natural resource. Because of the slow growth, there is no sustained development, and the vast majority of the population of those countries live in abject poverty. Now, the reasons given for the natural resource curse is twofold. There are economic reasons and there are political reasons. Now, the economic reason is what is known as the Dutch disease. This is a term that was coined back in the 50s when the Netherlands discovered oil in the North Sea. And essentially what happened, resources and capital moved from all of their above-ground industries into the oil sector. The concept is known as the crowding out effect. And what this did, it devastated the other industries and slowed down the economy, ultimately rendering or producing slow economic growth to those countries. The other thing that happens is there's an influx of oil money tends to push your currency up. When your currency increases, your exchange rate increases, and your locally produced goods and services become expensive and they're no longer competitive. So those two factors together combined makes the economic case that explains the natural resource curse.
Also, increasingly, we may have to add a dimension to that, and that is corruption and poor governance.
That's the political angle. So I said it's twofold. So we talked about the economic. Let's talk a little bit about the political. On the political front, there's a couple of things. Mostly in a fledgling democracy, institutions of governance are weak.
Very weak.
They're very they're not matured, and so this idea of transparency and accountability sometimes is lacking, sorely lacking.
So you would say that that is why in the developed countries like Norway, America, and Canada, these countries benefit from the oil.
They have strong institutions.
And also they have been able to address effectively the curse, the Dutch.
That's exactly right, but that's in part because of the strong institutions. The other political angle is sort of, you have the alignment of money and power in the hands of a state. And when you have that, there's bound to be some level of corruption. So you've got the corruption on the one hand.
Well, there have been excessive levels of corruption in many countries, like Nigeria, Angola, and Equatorial Guinea, for example. In that country, the son of the president bought an apartment building for $270 million in Paris, and the daughter of the Angolan president is considered richer than Oprah. So, and the people in those countries are living for under less than $1 a day.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can call countries out all day long, and the story tends to be the same.
And very next to Guyana is Venezuela.
Very next to Guyana is Venezuela.
And we have that problem. Well, Floyd, you just returned from Guyana, and I have been following what has been happening there. I'm going to come to the technical aspects, but as director of the Roraima Institute, I conducted some listening interviews, and we published it on the website, and we presented it in Georgetown at Carroll Lodge, that we asked people in various regions about 5 questions. And one of the question was, do you believe that you will benefit from the oil revenues? And there was not one single person that said that they will benefit. Now, how would you address that? If you were the president of Guyana, how would you address that? You have an idea to do something about that?
Well, I've got some ideas, and you can't really blame the people, because if history is any indication, typically the money comes in, it goes to the state, a few individuals do well, but the vast majority of people linger in poverty. I am a proponent, and I want to say this is not a policy recommendation, because I've not been retained to do policy, and that would require a little more study, but I am a strong advocate of something called direct distribution. And that has been, it's been talked about, it's been studied in various academic circles. And the reason people are pushing this direct distribution, well, let me explain what it is.
Exactly.
Direct distribution is the transfer of payments from the oil revenue from the state to the citizens. Everybody would get a check. Now, these payments would be taxed because you need that link of accountability. No taxation, no representation. So you would tax these payments. But everybody would get a check. The reason this is becoming increasingly popular, it's because, while you create a sovereign wealth fund, which is what every country has a tendency to do, take the monies, put it into a fund that they invest the money, they use it for infrastructure, and those kinds of things. That money grows, and you have money for future generation. That's all well and good. But if you could take 10 to 15% of that money and make direct payments to the citizens, I think it will address some immediate needs. I mean, if you talk to the average person in any of those countries, they have basic needs: food, uniform for their kids, books, shoes, basic needs. They would be able to do those things. But I wouldn't stop there. I would use policy to drive the kinds of behavior that I think are the foundations for a good life. And let me tell you what I mean by that. So you give this payment to an individual, and you could then say, if those monies are used for education, you get a tax break. If those monies are used to buy your first home, you get a tax break. If those monies are used for something to do with green, you get a tax break. Healthcare. And that way you're incentivizing, again, the kind of behaviors that everybody knows it's a foundation for a good life.
I like that idea because in a different context, both Brazil, Mexico, and some other countries have been actually giving direct payments to families to ensure that they keep their children at school. Because keeping a child at school costs money.
Absolutely.
They have to have 3 meals to
Absolutely.
eat. They have to have a book bag. They have to have books.
Yeah.
They have to have clothes. So
Essentials,
that
basic
sounds like a
essentials.
good idea. And I always like to remember my experience in Trinidad and Tobago when I was a trade consultant. I saw the country had a program called 7 Days. So I got curious and went in Chaguanas and visited some homes and asked people, what do you do with the money for 7 days? And they said to me, Paul, you see that book bag that I got for my child, that's 7 days. You see the television, that's 7 days. They had concrete things. And when people are poor and they have nothing and they get something, the other point, and I guess you will agree with this, you're a businessman. In economics, we speak about the impact of the forward multiplier effect and the backward multiplier. If you put money in people's pockets, they purchase.
Oh, absolutely.
And that creates
it's an economic stimulus.
A multiplying
It's a major
effect,
economic stimulus.
in my opinion. However, you spoke about the wealth fund. There have been also in countries where it has worked and doesn't work too well. But the wealth fund means that you're using this money not just to sit there, but to invest it so it could multiply, correct?
Yes.
And also, you're supposed to use it to diversify the economy and to advance the country so that when you don't have oil, you have a substitute. Do you agree that they belong to the people of Guyana and not to a small group of politicians?
No, absolutely. It's a national patrimony. It belongs to the people.
It's a national patrimony.
Here, and there's a huge headline, government should set aside oil money for every household. And this gentleman who says that is Professor Clive Thomas. Professor Clive Thomas, as you know, is quite a distinguished economist and has written widely and is quite respected. But I don't share the view that he has shared. Professor Thomas, and you can't discount what he says because he's an advisor to the president. So it's highly likely that whatever he says may manifest itself in the form of a government policy shortly. Professor Thomas says that we should take the oil money that we get when the oil begins to flow, and we should put 5,000 US in an envelope and post it home to every Guyanese. Now this is reflective of a mentality that believes in doling out money, a mentality that believes in a welfare system where people should go every month at certain government offices and line up for a check. Now these are not policies that are new. These are policies that have been used in the world widely, even in the United States of America. And what the data shows is that policies of this nature develops a degree of dependency that destroys the human initiative. It destroys families. It destroys communities. It creates not only a sense of dependency, but it creates parasitism. It makes the human being into a parasite, dependent only on the largesse that will come from the state. It destroys the work ethic of a people. It destroys the determination and the drive to succeed at a personal level. Because why you want to do that when somebody is going to send you a check? This theory has been debunked by the simple saying that you don't give a man a fish every day, you teach him how to fish. All of us know that saying growing up. You don't give a man a fish every day. You teach him how to fish. Clive Thomas is advocating that we must give the man a fish every day. Don't teach him to fish. If we follow this advice of Professor Clive Thomas, we will create a country of parasites. We will create a country where nobody will want to work. We will create a country where everybody is dependent, where there is no professionalism, there is no work ethic. Who will want to work when they know whether they work or not, they have a fat check coming to them every month? This is madness. It's madness. Use the money, and this shows that this government and those who are advising this government do not believe in wealth creation. Wealth creation is not part of their formula. And all over the world, societies have advanced, people have advanced through the creation of wealth. America was built upon private wealth, the creation of wealth. Japan was built because of entrepreneurism and creation of wealth. India was built, is being built now, and China as two of the strongest trading blocks in the world because of the human capital. Because of the human capital, the development, the education of the people of the country. Here we are making our people parasites. We are making them dependent upon a paycheck. Why not use that same money to build the university? Use that same money to give scholarships to children who can't go to school. Why not give that same money to ensure that every child has access to the internet? Why not give that same money to boost the manufacturing sector of the country? Use that same money to boost the productive sectors of the country right across the board. Our greatest potential still lies in agriculture. Use that money to develop cheap source of energy so that the manufacturing sector of our country can kick up and get going, and we can move from planting to processing of food. That the tomato that we are planting can be made into tomato ketchup, organic tomato ketchup, and not the one that you buy. Organic fruit juices by building factories here once we have cheap electricity. Woodworking, the move away from primary production, the exportation of raw logs, to value added. From raw gold to refined jewelry. If we use the money in the pursuit of those kinds of initiatives, then we will forever be rich as a country, because we are building the basis for wealth, and we will never be poor again. But you give them the money in an envelope, they blow it out, and the next day they become a pauper again until you give them the other envelope. That is the kind of development that we need with the oil money. Use it to develop our productive sectors. And many, many countries have failed to not do that. And that is why they depend solely on oil, and their economy becomes very, very contracted. And that is all that we need to do in Guyana. Use the oil wealth to enhance our productive sector, and that is what will spin the jobs. That will what will bring the investors. Once we have cheap electricity, once we have a modern technological state, once we have good internet, once we have a skilled labor force, we have good weather already, we have land, we have water, we have hydro potential. We have so much that needs money to develop, to make us the most attractive investment destination in the world. And we have the capacity to feed most of South America and the entire Caribbean. All we need is the processing to make the market to land, the farm to market roads. That is where we have to channel the oil money. Not giving people an envelope. I am shocked that that is the kind of policy that we are publicly advocating in our country in the year 2018. Those things have been tried and failed in every other country in the world. And in 2018, 2 professors, because there was another professor sitting there too, and a lawyer. But I don't hold them responsible for what Professor Clive Thomas says, but what Professor Clive Thomas says must never be encouraged in this country.